right. And so if you're new to Covenant, we are a Midwest consulting firm, but we have a global focus. We have clients and we support folks around the world. And our core focus is about helping companies solve business problems through technology. And so we're a full stack of Microsoft partner and are really we're happy to work with people through the consulting decision-making process, deliver solutions when it comes time to execute, provide ongoing managed services, and of course, software licensing. So a little bit about Kurt and I this morning. Um, I'm a longtime transformation executive and will be hosting most of today's session. Kurt is the brains behind the beauty, I'd like to say. And so a little bit about me. I actually, throughout my career, have been inspired to help people go from amazing idea to concrete execution. I have this concept to concrete, and I think that's where the hard work happens, right? It's fun at the beginning to create and ideate. The hard work happens when you work to make things concrete. Uh, at this point in my career, I think it's important for me to always stay grounded in my purpose, which is really to create a safe space to learn, to grow, and to contribute. So this topic of artificial intelligence, right? You can goes, gets its roots in the early 70s. And I could be a deep PhD with long study in this topic. I am not that person, but we have a lot of the analysis and research that we brought into today's information. And Kurt is closer to being that person. Historically, I like to say I was an accidental CIO. I served in the role of CIO for a little over 15 years, but never intended to do that. It just so happened that, solving business problems and kind of going concept to concrete led me in that direction. A little flavor, I've been all over the world, but I started in the Midwest on a farm, and I've come back to the Midwest. And so, Kurt, do you want to give a little flavor about yourself?
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. We're glad to have you on the webinar, and we hope that we can give you a better understanding of how you might be able to use artificial intelligence in your organization. I guess briefly put, my passion is to basically convert magic into understanding, essentially, right? So a lot of the things that people see or perhaps what you read about in the marketing literature from Microsoft or whatever, it seems like magic. And really, at the end of the day, it's about translating that magical experience, if you will, into something that's not only understandable, but something that's applicable to help you in your organization.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Kurt. So as I mentioned, we'll focus on the strategies for integrating Copilot into your environment and best practices related to that. We will have time for Q&A. And through while we were building today's conversation and the content to share with you, we had to keep ourselves focused. So we do have additional coming up sessions that we can both share through webinars or arrange to work with you directly. All right. So what do we know? So there's a lot of research that's been conducted through MIT, McKinsey, and Microsoft themselves have contributed to what's called the Work Trend Index. The Work Trend Index in 2023, right, indicated that, and this is what people feel, right, that 64% employees don't feel like they have enough time to do the work on their plate, and they don't have the energy to get it done. 57% of employees are saying that they spend this amount of time communicating, meetings, emails, chat. It really depends on your role as a knowledge worker. You can spend much more, but 57% of employees' time is really spent in this area. And then the work trend index also tells us that 43% of their time is then committed to creating documents, spreadsheets, imagery, might be marketing, messaging, etc. And so, what do we also know? Well, the 2024 Work Trends Index came out and said AI has brought itself to work. We are seeing the use of tools across the majority of workplaces. 75% of people report that they're using some form of artificial intelligence at work today. 78% of users are bringing their own tools, right? So, as technology leaders, we know that that can be a challenge. As business leaders, we know it can be frustrating because when we bring our own tools, they're not integrated into the rest of our workplace. 52% of AI users are actually, and I find this fascinating, reluctant to admit that they're using AI for some of their most important tasks. Now, this is a complex one, and um, to unpack. Some of that is people know they shouldn't be using outside tools in a work environment. They are hesitant because of potential maybe security concerns, putting kind of work information into publicly available tools. Also, there's this softer concern around, hey, I'm using this tool to do something that I'm really good at doing. It's just making me faster. But if I tell people, what's it going to mean? And so this 52% is an interesting um, uh, area to unpack. So, so we know that the employee usage of AI in the workplace is high. Um, the work trend index also has indicated, right, that in the index, 79% of business leaders do believe that artificial intelligence is important to their business. And there's a feeling of urgency, right, to stay competitive. Um, 60% of those leaders also say they don't have a plan yet, right? They're not quite clear on a vision on how to move soundly forward. And then 59% of the group articulates that they worry that about quantifying those actual productivity gains that are in the big stories, right? And so, how do we move past, right, the shiny object concept, right, of artificial intelligence? How do we quantify? How do we truly adopt and make a real difference to our employees, to our operations, and to our business outcomes? We like to think of uh, Copilot and the offering across the entire Microsoft stack is really starting to enable kind of these major steps in value creation. First of all, the personal productivity. This is where most people are familiar with the potential of the tools. The operational advantage. This is about how are we engaging with our customers or our consumers, and how are we reshaping our business processes? The penultimate is what's happening to our industry. There are some industries that are being much more rapidly impacted than others. Heavy knowledge industries, for example, the legal industry is really seeing an overhaul in how legal firms are uh, uh, offering their solutions, offering their skill sets, and completely turning on ear how they deliver. Just recently, Accenture has come out with a deep article on about how artificial intelligence is really upending how their consulting organization does the work that they do every day. So what does that mean? So we bring that back to, so what are our fundamental priorities, right? And so how do we need to think about um, bringing AI and the stack of Copilot into our environment, right? So how do we focus on uh, what might be our business's kind of 3 to 5 year strategies? What are our key, you know, strategic pillars? What do we need to do in terms of growing our business and improving our customer experience? How does that break down, and how might we use um, artificial intelligence, which is a new way of solving problems, to drive faster business growth? How do we become more effective, right? This is driving our profit, right? How do we improve our margins by improving our workflows and business processes? And then, of course, uh, the the challenge of individual productivity, team productivity, as well as employee experience, right? How is it that we are continuing to level up? How each of our employees contribute? Um, how do we help people get productive as quickly as possible? And then how do we create an employee experience where people want to stay? All right. Okay. With that, I'm going to ask Michelle for a little bit of help. Would like to understand, give you a chance to share how you're using AI today. And this can be in all the broad categories. Michelle, could you initiate the poll?
Yes, sorry, I did a little bit early, so it's
Oh,
live,
okay.
Jen.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
I was not looking at this. All right.
Well, the good news is that we should have some results already.
Right. So, Michelle, are we seeing some folks' response?
Yes, we are. Right now we have, let me get to the poll. About 33% are experimenting with Copilot. And then on this, well, I'll wait till you get to the next slide.
All right. Let me move back to the next slide. All right. So what I want to do is just step back a little bit uh, when it comes to the language we use to describe artificial intelligence. It's a ginormous subject, and right as I mentioned, the phrase artificial intelligence really became used in the academic circles in 1970. Um, and so, we've had scientists, engineers, inventors, theorists working um, on the concept of artificial intelligence for 5 decades, right? Almost 5.5 decades. Built upon the concept, right, of artificial intelligence is this idea of machine learning, which you may have heard and you may be actually using in your company today, right? And so machine learning is this model that uses the kind of learning algorithms to rapidly create predictions based on vast data sets. And so it simulates a learning and becomes creates the ability to rapidly identify patterns. Within machine learning is this concept of deep learning. And then really in the last 2 years, right, it was late 2023 that I like to say that the democratization of generative AI really kind of burst on the public's into the public's consciousness. And that was really with the use of Chat GPT, and being able um, to interface with machine learning, deep learning models in a natural language method. Yeah. I like to simplify the concepts. And so, why is this different, right? Um, I was lucky enough to be a young professional during the when the intranet and e-commerce kind of burst onto the scenes in the late 90s and early 2000s. Um, Now is the same kind of emergence of kind of game changing technology. Why is it different? What is machine learning? So, machine learning, right, is think about how teaching a child, right? And you show a child pictures of cats and dogs. And the child, right, therefore learns this is what cats look like, this is what dogs look like. Now, this is different than um, uh, defining a formula, right? And how to uh, always get the same answer, right? So this is pattern recognition. So this is training, right? Technology to do rapid pattern uh, differentiation to get to the point then to do predictions, right? And suggest decisions. So there are two kinds of learning, and I find this interesting because you start to hear this concept when people start to talk about AI. And so for the non-engineers in the room, right, you can hear publicly about concerns, uh, uh, language models having um, a bias, etc. So how does that happen, right? So there's two kinds of deep learning that I mentioned here. One is this concept of supervised deep learning, right? And so this is, you can use the analogy of a teacher teaching children, right? And saying, providing um, uh, uh, examples like here are apples, right? Here are oranges, and different examples of those. And then a student learning to differentiate because they've seen examples. And so this is what could be called supervised learning. I'm giving examples of what the answers might be, and the technology is learning. There's also unsupervised deep learning, right? And so you can draw a simple analogy to, um, you know, giving a child, right, a number of toys, right? And without saying these are blue and these are red and these are green, right? And just letting the child kind of discover and sort and mix themselves. And so that's unsupervised learning. Kurt, do you want to add any color or flavor to these kind of core concepts made simple?
Yeah, I mean, I think the probably the philosophical takeaway here is that while computers seem to act like humans, they really are dramatically way off of what we consider human cognition, right? They give the illusion, right, of having rationality and intelligence, but really, from a computer's perspective, everything is rendered down to a binary yes or no, which is the reason why we need neural networks, because the neural networks act like a sieve, if you will, of running through multiple layers and levels with regards to this sort of patterning or recognition, if you will, that the computer's going through. And again, with each level, if you will, or layer of the neural network, you're ending up with binaries, yeses or nos, right? But at the end of the day, the computer doesn't really know what it's telling you. It's just simply giving you feedback, and it gives the resemblance of human rationality or magic, but really it's not. So it's merely giving you back in the case of generative AI, for example. We talk about language, right? When it returns a string of text back to you, it really doesn't know what it's giving back to you. What it's doing is it's giving you a predictive series of texts based on your prompt, and that is trained against billions and billions of data points. So I'm not trying to minimize the value and the ability. Again, this next slide, Copilot or AI can act like a smart assistant, right? But
Right.
it isn't really human intelligence.
Right. This would be the counterbalance of my analogies, right? It's helpful to compare what we know to what we're trying to learn. And so I thought it's really important to remember, though, that not human, right? But let's take this concept uh, and look at Copilot, right, as a smart assistant. So we're going to build through moving past this as a shiny object, right, and figuring out how to um, first uh, uh, embrace the potential from a personal productivity perspective and to build, right, the potential in leveraging the tools in operational advantage as we mature in our different organizations. And the fact of the matter, if you're on the call today, you're in the early majority, right? And so there's and people are moving incredibly quickly. And so it's great to hear that, 35% of us on the call are in some way experimenting. Let's look at because I want to get into tangible hands-on. And so let's look at the idea of Copilot as a smart assistant. Let's what I'm going to do is just kind of walk through this concept of a day in the life, right? And so Copilot's my smart assistant. First thing in the morning, I don't know about you, but first thing in the morning, while I try not to, I do pick up my phone and I look at my emails. And so um, doing that has changed for me over the last 6 to 8 months. And so what do I do now, right? Now, actually, I using Copilot. I open my Copilot on my phone, and my first question is summarize the emails I've received over the last 24 hours, specifically marked what's urgent. If you are like me, I have emails from my internal colleagues, from my customers. I have emails from vendors, and as much as I try to keep them out, I have promotional content that comes into my email. So I want to sort through all of that. All right. And so I ran this last night so we could take a look this morning. And so I asked this question. And so the response, right? Sure, Jen, here are the summaries of the urgent emails you received in the last 24 hours. So first of all, accounting is reaching out to me. Secondly, I have a partner piece of work I'm doing with a Casey Tech Council. And then thirdly, a colleague, right, of mine, Doug, is asking for some immediate support and help for a call that we actually had this morning. And so I said, oh, all right, I need to drill into this call. Remember, I haven't got my coffee yet. I'm still kind of looking at my phone like, okay, so he's asking for pricing details. And so I'm asking, what are the pricing details that Doug's asked for? And so what I did, so the response, right, my Copilot on my phone brings me back, hey, this is, you guys have talked through pricing earlier. There is a work breakdown structure available. And so what did I do? I went ahead and the suggested prompt said, hey, provide some additional information. And so I had put some information together, back in September. And so Copilot brought that up to me. I was like, oh, right. Okay. So I'm going to use this in the morning. So what did I do? I said in my message, I went ahead and typed up, would you send a link to Doug right away? And so my Copilot drafted a quick email with a subject, link to Copilot adoption work breakdown structure. So we could have that this morning when we got on our call. I didn't have to go look for files. I didn't have to remember where all this was. Copilot brought all this up for me. All right, so what happens next in my day? Okay, so I want to demonstrate a little bit for you, kind of Copilot Live. Remember, this is about personal productivity. And so what I'm going to do now, let's see, I just need to adjust. And so my objective now is to do a little bit of research and then create a summary. So pardon me as I adjust my screen. All right, so I was testing this a little earlier today. So what I've done here is just navigate to what's referred to as Copilot Chat, right? And so Copilot Chat has two kind of settings. One, web, and Copilot Chat for web acts like Chat GPT. Just by a show of hands, who in the group has used Chat GPT or something similar, Bard or others, in the last week? So this is familiar, right, to most of us. And so ChatGPT, Copilot Web is built on the ChatGPT logic. And so what I'm doing is accessing all of the data and capabilities available there, but through the filter of my Microsoft tenant. And so what happens here, I'm going to write a quick prompt. The prompt will never go out into the world at large. It stays within my Microsoft tenant. The generated outcome then also stays within my Microsoft tenant. This is a key concept, right? To understand that to keep your organization's information safe and to keep the generated information safe, that the way Microsoft is structured engineered it stays within the tenant. All right, so what I'm going to
Thank you
do
for
is,
calling.
was there a question? Oh,
I think somebody's dialing out or something.
okay. So what I'm going to do now, I need to research. You might recall that second email in my mobile Copilot was about the KC Tech Council. And so I'm going to ask Copilot, what is, that went really fast. I said, what is the KC Tech Council? Provide a description, their mission, list top 10 members. I want to know the events since March, and what are the events scheduled for the next 12 months. Include any documentation and create a table. That includes points of contact, events, and dates. And so very quickly, you saw I didn't even get to read out my prompt before we got a response, right? And so the response shares with me, right, that the KC Tech Council is independent. It's a nonprofit organization. It's focused in the Kansas City regional area. It has a mission, right, to advocate, develop, catalyze, and promote. Okay, that fits, right, with what we want to do at Covenant. It shares with me the top 10 members, right? And so I know, okay, these are the members of the Tech Council and really shape what happens in the community. And then it's sharing with me. And so now I have a sense of, okay, what are the types of events? And so what I'm trying to do is I want to decide if I want to recommend, right, that we go forward and engage in a partnership, right? And so this might be a vendor that you're investigating. Maybe you have a short list of some vendors that you need some services from, and so maybe you've put a similar, what is veracity, or what is Brightpoint, what is, uh, you know, um, Plastics 2030. Who are these people? And so you put to do the research for you, right? And so what I want to point out is a few things. So one of the key principles and tenets of using AI in the enterprise is transparency. And so you'll note right here, I have a little reference number 1, another reference number 1, reference 2, 3, 4. And so what's happening here, right? And then down at the bottom of my result, I have those reference sites, right? That this generated outcome pulled from in order to create the response that I needed. All right, so well, this was interesting. I think that what I need to do is actually share this internally with my leadership team. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this info. And so now I'm going to take you to the next step. Right. So hold on just a
So Jen,
minute.
while you're doing that, I'll just say that, one of the reasons why the citations are embedded in the results is because of this idea of a human in the middle. As we kind of talked about earlier, right? The AI Copilot's doing its thing, right? But really, we always want to have a human in the middle to evaluate and validate the results to ensure that they're accurate.
So what I want to do is I'm going to create, I navigated to Word. And so I've opened up my Copilot chat box here. And so I want to create an executive summary from the following. And so let's see, that was Casey Tech Council. Using the executive summary template. All right. And so I'm going to ask Copilot to do that. Here we go. And so what I'm doing now is taking the information that I've researched, that I know has great citations. And now I'm creating the information in a corporate standard, right? A way that we want to look at and assess decision making. Let's see. We're looking things over. All right. All right. So what Copilot has done is draft for me, right? So this is a draft. The term Copilot was a brilliant stroke, I think, because it's not the pilot, right? I have to have the knowledge and experience to make sure that what's in this document is how I would want to express it. And so here's our executive summary template. The created output includes some of the items that actually weren't in the original but have been enhanced. So I took the original research using that and then the AI from to blend with the template, right? And it's enhanced my content here. So from a findings perspective, I have my recommendations, right? And so I'll probably want to make a few adjustments, and then I can use this right internally to communicate. I could just as easily have created this in Outlook if I wanted to go straight to Outlook and create an email, but I decided that I wanted to use a Word document. Yep. All right. Let's see, we're cooking with gas. If you have thoughts or comments, feel free to go ahead and add them in the chat. All right. let me get back. So let's say that I've handled that number 2 urgent item that was in my email, right? I also realized that day before yesterday, I was double booked on a number of calls. And so what I want to do is leverage my Copilot to go back and catch up on what I missed. And so, oops, we're going to go to Tuesday. That was Tuesday morning. You see, I have a conflict. This is a pretty good day, not so many conflicts, but I'm going to go to this data discovery call that I missed. And I want to share with you how I can catch up without having to really, call Pierre. Uh, and so after the call, I can easily navigate to the recap. And so the recap here shares, quite a bit of detail from the meeting notes. I can expand that information. And so very, very detailed in the conversation regarding the data discovery. Uh, now I took a quick look over here. I'm like, oh yeah. So Pierre and our client had a great conversation. It was not just one way, but I want to know sort of, do I need to do anything? And so really I was just mentioned once. And so I could navigate to that point of the transcript to see the context if I missed anything, but really it was not my main meeting. So I'm glad I was not mentioned often. I do want to make sure we followed up. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate and say, okay, we need to do a follow-up from this. I know that my colleague is super busy. So from the meeting transcript, we've generated some suggested follow-ups. I know that we needed to share the entity relationship diagram. And we were going to share some more information about a particular tool related to database maintenance. And so from here, I could easily create a task. And so this create a task would add a to-do on my to-do list. I could create a task and assign it to Pierre. I can also do a quick draft email as a follow-up. And so if I draft an email, I can take a quick look. This maps to mostly what we talked about. There are the 2 follow-ups. I like that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and move into Outlook. And so what's happened here is we've moved into Outlook. Here's my email. And so I'm going to I kind of like things to be organized in a certain way. I'm going to do a little bit editing, and then I can send that email off. So a couple things there. One, from a personal productivity perspective, I've gotten a lot accomplished autonomously, like uh, with the content that's available in my organization, um, without spending a bunch of time to go and find it. Right. Um, I've also been able to probably elevate my engagement. I'm pretty sure that creating that follow-up email was much more thorough than I might have been able to do really without the support of the auto-generated follow-up and actions. All right. All right. Let's see. So what did we just look at? So what we just took a look at really was the kind of core of the pyramid of leveling or leveraging kind of AI related technology in the organization, right? And so what we looked at could really be considered core AI skills, right? And so if you recall at the beginning, one of the key concerns, right, from the work index survey was how do I quantify the benefits? Well, it's quite interesting that there's been a lot of research about personal productivity and how artificial intelligence will impact that productivity. Microsoft's research published as far back as December 2023 was consistently reporting and finding that 10-hour savings a month per knowledge worker was the norm. MIT, their study, which came out just in August 2024, asserts that a knowledge worker is going to improve their productivity by 40%. That's, to me, that's a mind-boggling number, right? And so, what does that actually equate to? So, you're either going to save time or you're going to improve the type of work that you're doing because you're not bogged down in the mundane. So you saw that I probably created a much more thorough response email. I was able to respond to my colleague Doug, right, with some specifics about a work breakdown structure. I was able to do all of that without having to hunt and peck and find and ask my colleagues for information prior to getting that work out. And so what does that equate to? So in the Midwest, if I use a common manufacturing company, an average fully loaded cost per hour per person, knowledge worker, somebody that has to engage with a computer, is about $65 an hour. So if I could say, well, Microsoft says I might be able to improve my productivity by 10 hours a month. Now, Microsoft's trying to sell me something, so I want to look at other sources. Well, MIT is saying that I could save even more. So, all right, let's go with 10 hours a month. Microsoft is now saying 15 hours a month, but we're going to stay conservative. But that equates to $650 a month in improved productivity. And so what does that mean from a Copilot cost perspective? Well, Copilot per user is $36 a month. So you can quickly see the potential, right? You can quickly see the return. So how do we go from I love the shiny object to true personal productivity? It's not as straightforward as deploying the license, right? A survey by Ernst & Young revealed that 94% of finance leaders, so these are the folks, right, who are their life is the financial health of the organization. 94% of finance leaders believe that a lack of strong digital culture poses a significant threat to the success of technical transformations. Well, what does that mean? So when you dive more deeply, McKinsey, Bain, a number of kind of well-respected research institutions indicate that between 75 and 80% of companies fail to meet their goals when they set out on a transformation journey. Well, what are the best practices of those companies that do achieve what they set out to accomplish? Well, those that are successful, 70% who invest in training programs have a higher success rate. So there's training and education. 67% clearly define a change approach. So as a change approach, being clear on what we want from what does good look like? Who needs to change? What are behaviors that need to change? What are mindsets that need to change? A change plan also includes how do we measure change, right? We also know that I mentioned this, right? 80% of efforts fail due to lack of continued reinforcement. So what does that mean? Projects are excited, there's lots of momentum, but then 2 months later, it was the flavor of the month, and there's a drop off of support and reinforcement. 73% of employees in change efforts feel out of the loop and uninformed. And so these are indicators, right? That just trying to throw an easy switch is not the only step. But what do we feel, right? And so we know that from a change perspective, there is truly a curve. And I think that most of the leaders that I've talked to about Copilot, AI more broadly, personal productivity, generative AI, there's this kind of like, wow, this is amazing, right? There's this like, I can't even believe it. Um, Microsoft has reported, right, that some of their organizations that brought in Copilot licenses have seen a drop off in usage. And so what happens? Because this truly is a change in behaviors, right? And so I needed to think about when I wanted to research the Casey Tech Council, I didn't go to Google, right? I had specific questions. I acted differently um, to get my work completed, right? And so there is a change curve. There's a learning to think differently, and behaviorally, it's a little difficult, right? Oh, I need to think a little bit differently. I need to think, and so what we find is supporting um, organizations and the people in the organizations through that difficult time, right? Where some folks are like, oh, I just like, where do I push the button to create the email? I can't remember, right? And so that's the difficult. And so we have a real mechanism to kind of core behavioral science that supports the learning and helps you through, right? This sort of trough of despair or trough of disillusionment, right? And get back up into kind of really realizing your success. This kind of, oh, okay, now we get it, and wow, we can really do so much more. I'm working with a manufacturing organization. They started their journey back in April, and it's a real with 300 people around the world, and they have seen uh, pockets of the people in their first pilot group kind of go through this. It's difficult and fall back and a little bit of drop off in usage. And then there are pockets of people who absolutely uh, embraced and improved how they're working. And so what we're doing now is another effort to come back and support those folks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I want to make sure that we can move to the operational advantage. So let's say that you've created knowledge and expectations in the organization. You've started to really help people think differently and really leverage the personal productivity. Um, in a focus group I facilitated back in August. The focus group was made up of highly accomplished technical technology professionals. And so I was a little hesitant going into the working sessions because I felt a little bit like, a doctor treating doctors, right? So a lot of really smart people in the room, a lot of people very confident with technology and new ideas. And it was day 3 of our 2-week adoption sprint that a gentleman said, "Oh, this is not like Google. It's different." And there was this moment, right, where he said, thinking and using and interacting with the generative AI is different. He had to think differently. And so in a 2-week adoption sprint, right there at day 3 and 4 is when we start to circle back around on how do you write prompts? How do you engage with a tool that actually responds better when I explain what my role is and what the purpose of the analysis is? And And when I articulate what I want the output to look like, I get a better result. But how do we move? So how do we continue to move beyond personal productivity? How do we move up this kind of value chain? And so this is really where your expertise as a business professional kicks in, right? And this is the collaborative stage, really, where you're now moving into the stage where you and your colleagues have really started to understand how to think differently. And now we want to let's look at the different business functions in your area. Here is an example, right? Starting to understand where do my sales team spend their time? Where does my customer service team spend their time, right? And deciding to then undertake, and this could be a 4 to 5 day set of working sessions, depending on kind of your focus, right? Maybe I want to focus on my HR onboarding and offboarding, right? And so we really spend time to understand what is happening in the business, what are the challenges in this area, and where might I be able to have some true shifts, right? Using this kind of new type of technology. And keeping in mind that we want to quantify. So some examples, right? When you start to think about, okay, we spend a lot of time in HR, making sure my policies are up to date. We spend a lot of time in sales or in kind of partner negotiations, creating analysis for negotiation, for proposals. And then what, let's tie that to true business metrics. This is the discipline it takes, right, for you and your teams to drive through that sort of trough and into value creation, is that spending the time to think through your business operations, think through building up what a business case might look like, right? How do I map? Um, you know, maybe I want to look at margin. Maybe I want to do some cost avoidance, right? Let's focus on employee experience because we have, higher unplanned turnover than we'd like, because we know that the cost to hire uh, uh, across the U.S. Is a good 15 to 18% of yearly salary. So if I can improve um, my planned turnover and improve my um, retention, that is direct savings to the cost to hire. How can I do that? All right. So a key takeaway, right, for you to think about is, how do you lead with value, right? So how do you go through the process of experimentation and move into really kind of embracing the potential? Um, how do you move from this is a shiny object to let's make decisions based on kind of some must-win business challenges, right? We must lower our unplanned turnover, right? Okay, so what do we need to do there, and how might we solve some of those problems using the tools now available? It's a shift in mindset, right? Moving from the skeptical and the shiny object concern to, okay, we're going to solve these real business problems. Um, and then keeping an eye towards those quantifiable benefits, right? In that study I mentioned from um, Accenture, uh, they share their kind of 5 top learnings and key principles as they're overhauling how they execute their business. One, right, is the lead with value. Their second is you can start small, but keep a clear path to scaling, right? So this concept of concrete and iterate your way to create value. You, the 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 moonshot, right, is not where you're going to find wins, right? Where you're going to find wins is the block and tackle, start small and keep a clear path to solving, the priority challenges that you have ahead of you. A quick example beyond personal productivity, right? But let's talk about manufacturing. So we all know that production issues, downtime, wastage, all drive costs in a manufacturing process. So prior to any complex automation, right? You could think about, okay, so how do I analyze my defect rates using a Six Sigma discipline? So, I can, get out of my production system an Excel list of my production defects. I can apply the logic of kind of Six Sigma analysis across that data set to then provide suggestions and be able to create charts. The most recent Excel now integrates with Python. So the visualization of your data is even easier, right? I can, like we did today, use chat to discover. We've not talked about it, but similar to a tool called Miro, Copilot Whiteboard is a collaborative tool that workflows across your organization. I can collaborate in teams like what we looked at today. I might then take that into Outlook and then finally create a presentation. This is all out of the box, right? There's no automation required here, but this is rather applying the potential to business problems that we know that we have. Maybe your organization has some really deep Excel experts, maybe Excel jockeys, right? And so how can we apply the power of kind of AI in Excel to what your team is trying to accomplish today? So our friends at Accenture, talked about, unlocking the real value, right? Is when you are investing in AI to really reimagine your ways of working. It's also important to know, right, that the technology itself should be considered 30% of the cost and effort, right? The remaining 70% resides in thinking about, do we have the capabilities and skills to think differently? Do we have the partner network to help us solve these problems? Have we done the right training? Have we executed our change? That's how you get sustainable value. Michelle, aren't we scheduled for about, let's see, 75 minutes?
Yep.
Yeah,
And
15 more minutes.
we have 15 minutes left. I think we're going to land this. We're going to kind of scoosh a little bit. I want to reserve some time at the end. Kurt's prepared the first stages of kind of smart automation, but I want to introduce a concept here. So let's move beyond the Copilot is my smart assistant. Now let's say Copilot is my smart team, right? So to have a smart assistant, you've spent time with the assistant, you interact, the assistant actually starts to learn, maybe it learns your writing style, it learns kind of your prioritization, it learns how you interact. There is a learning curve that Copilot in personal productivity goes through. This is also important when you're thinking about adoption. Your first experience with Copilot in personal productivity is just that. It's like a new hire has stepped through the door, right? They're qualified, but they don't know you yet. And so there's a curve, not only learning curve for you, but also learning curve for the Copilot itself. Well, now let's think about Copilot as a smart team. So there's this concept of agents. And so agents um, are written or built to do a series of things that you need to accomplish. And the team of agents, right, or autonomous agents might be agents that interact with other agents, right, in getting work done. And so we were brainstorming some scenarios. This scenario came up, I don't know, maybe because we were playing a webinar. Um, and so if I built a smart team, right, I would have an events coordinator. I would have a speaker liaison, maybe someone who's working with myself and Kurt to make sure our material is all prepared. I would have a, a, a support agent that interacts with all of you, a content agent that ensures that all the content is provided, and then maybe a logistics agent, right, to make sure that the call is correct, the events are published properly. Well, what, how do I figure out how to design and train these agents? Right. Kurt, I'm going to pass the baton to you. Speak a little bit to the concept, right, of building an agent. And then you might have time to kind of do a tiny bit of show and tell. Let's keep us to the next kind of 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. You want me to go ahead and share my screen out?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to load up Copilot Studio. I think it's been mentioned a little bit in the slides that Jen has presented here. But really, when we look at Copilot Studio, we're looking at operationalizing, if you will, generative AI within the organization. So if you remember, there were kind of three primary categories. The first one was personal productivity. And this would be primarily targeted to Copilot for M365, using the generative assistant sidecar and things like, Word, PowerPoint, and so forth. Then Jen showed a little bit of a kind of a day in the life when she was going through personal productivity. With Copilot Studio, we're really kind of aiming at that middle rung or that middle tier, or perhaps even the disruptive tier, which is about, how do we bring in generative AI capabilities into the organization by integrating smart agents or specialized functions into my way of working. So probably not going to have time to do a full demo here, but I guess what I'd like to do is just simply talk about this idea of creating custom copilots. So within Copilot Studio, I have the ability of creating a custom copilot or a brand new copilot. And as you can see here, there are a number of different templates that are available that I can use or start with. So think of a copilot as a completely separate chatbot, so to speak. And the chatbot can be made available through Teams. It can be made available through Teams chat, but it's essentially a chatbot on its own rails or on its own lane, so to speak, right? All it's going to do is that one thing in that one lane, right? It's going to be very specialized. So if I want something, let's say around weather, for example, I can select this, use the weather template, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a custom copilot for me. And what it'll do is it'll allow me to put in a location, a place, a city, or something like that. And it will return, as you can see, based on MSN weather, it will return the weather information or the forecast information for that particular area. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, though, going back, is instead of creating a custom copilot, what I may want to do is create an agent within Copilot for M365. So how that's different is that when you are in Microsoft Teams, for example, and you are using Copilot this way in Teams, this is M365 Copilot, for example, any agents that you build can actually be retrieved, if you will, or chatted down here using the agent @ moniker here, right? So right within my team session, my M365 team session, for example, I can interact with these specialized agents that again can provide similar capabilities. That may be going out to a knowledge base and bringing in very specific information from my M365 environment, or it could be pulling information in from an external environment as well. But I would interact that way through this particular interface here. So a couple of ways of doing this. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole demonstration process, as it would take a bit too much time, but just note that there are just two kind of different approaches here. One, again, creating your own separate Copilot. The other is using agents within the Microsoft 365 Copilot. I'd also like to mention quickly that when you go out and you create a Copilot specifically, there are a number of things that you're typically wanting to look at here. There are topics, there's knowledge, and there are actions. And so as you can see here across the top, I have a Copilot here that I created. Notice that across the top menu here, I have the ability to configure knowledge. This is the area that it's going to be going to. This is an external website, for example. It's going to be going to this information to get its knowledge base in order to answer my questions. My questions are going to be defined in the area of topics, for example. So you can see here, these are different topics and topic phrases. So if I want to have a simple topic, for example, as you can see here, I've got a flowchart kind of interface here where I can go in and I can actually edit what are called trigger phrases. And these particular trigger phrases then will result in some kind of an action or redirection. This is how the conversational flow gets built. And then finally, I can create actions within my Copilot. In this case, these are different actions available. They're out of the box actions. I can interact with Excel. I can interact with third-party services, Dataverse, and so forth. So this may be a way of interacting with external data. So I'm going to stop there because I know that we've got about 5 minutes left. So.
Yeah, and Kurt, I just want to, that's a great teaser. We have a full session focused on kind of going deeper in how that works, and then ideating how you might use. Let's say I'm a manufacturing organization, and I have to do, I need to forecast demand. I need to understand my supply, changes in supply, and adjust my kind of maybe manufacturing scheduling, right? And so I can use the knowledge, right, to pull in my sources of information that impact forecasting. It might be from my SAP data. It could be then combined with maybe I have my main customers send me demand spreadsheets, and with those as my knowledge bases, then I can interact with that information. And so that's kind of another way of thinking, right, about building and the potential of ideating around Copilot. All right. So I'm going to take the screen back, and we're going to land today's conversation. So, right, we've moved past the shiny object. Folks in our organization have really started to understand how to interact differently with a tool that's powered by machine learning, large language models, and I can interact with using kind of natural language or generative AI. Where do I focus, right? And so what we find is you really need to move past the big concept and get into, okay, but where should I focus? And so we have some upcoming sessions that focus specifically in HR, and we can focus specifically in sales and marketing. And so those functional focuses can really be helpful as you're thinking about how to lead within your organization, right? And not try to, boil the ocean, but rather focus in. We can focus with the technology organization. And going beyond how does the tool work and how do I deploy it, but how do I run my business function and what are my challenges? So I have a question for you. There's a lot of, before I get there, I did want to mention that it's an important aspect not to be overlooked, right? Is to ensuring that in the organization you're fostering kind of trust and responsible use. Um, Today's discussion doesn't go deep into security and sensitive data types and content, but it, you likely have that as a concern. And so we do have some upcoming webinars, and we're also happy to spend some time directly with you about how to move forward while you're also managing your kind of security and content environment. It does not need to be linear, but there are some some uh, configurations to put in place to ensure that you can launch an effort with confidence. All right. Uh, all in all, the change research, as well as the kind of most recent Accenture research that came out, kind of caps off their kind of 5 main things to remember, is that executive sponsorship and leadership focus is critical, and it needs to be sustained leadership focus, right? It can't be if your leadership team tends to be like super excited today and something new in 3 months, you really have to have some discussions internally about how can you create sustained focus. And that sustained focus happens when you break it down into smaller wins, right? So personal productivity, of function focused, building the value. And so really staying mindful of how do I create wins? How do I measure and articulate ongoing? All right. There's a lot of content. Hopefully I've sparked and activated a lot of thoughts in your mind today. If you take a moment, Michelle, if she hasn't already, has kind of our final poll. What might be the 2 next steps, given this kind of broad topic of today's discussion, that you would want to take? Michelle, it looks like you
Yeah,
have the
that
new
was,
survey out. Thank you.
yes. Yep. It went out already. So far, Jen, 26% accelerate adoption for productivity with Copilot and accelerate AI adoption for process and value stream improvements.
Great. We are looking for kind of where value stream or business function areas you're kind of come to the top of your list, because there are a number of directions, and so we would adjust our priority of our upcoming webinars based on kind of your input on kind of the functional area you're most interested in, or maybe the top 3 that you're interested in, and we can talk with you about focusing on those. All right. All right. As we land the plane today, um, the Gartner hype cycle about kind of technology almost exactly maps the personal and organizational change cycle. So you see this curve, right? And what is happening at the top of the hype cycle is that excitement. Wow. Inventors see the potential. What happens through this sort of trough of this delusionment, is that the hard work has to happen, right, between the kind of peak of expectations through the trough and into kind of plateau of productivity. And that's the hard work of breaking it down, being pragmatic, measuring and moving forward, not trying to be perfect, but trying to learn and move forward. All right. And so I'm a fan of a roadmap of, and so in the deck that you get, right, here's a bit of a summary. right? How do you maximize the impact? How do you go from idea to impact, personal productivity, operational advantage, and potentially, bending the curve on innovation in your industry? All right. Important mentor of mine a number of years ago, and you see the slide's a little fuzzy because I've had this in my personal files for a good 15 plus years. You can't stop the waves, but you can definitely learn to surf. And I know that Kurt and I would love to help you learn to surf. And there's lots of resources. All right. All right, with that, we'll conclude. Kurt and I are here for another 15 minutes. And so do you have questions, or do we have questions, Michelle, that were submitted through the chat?
No questions in the chat.
All right.
Hey, Jen, I've got a question, and perhaps for the group here. And it goes back to the shiny object slide, right? So clearly, a lot of what we've seen in terms of the takeoff of the AI interest happened with ChatGPT, and a lot of that really has been organic, right? So people on their own have gone out, they've signed up for it, they've begun using it, and so forth. Clearly, there hasn't been a whole lot of organizational guardrails. In fact, if anything, it's almost been in spite of that people are using it, continue to use it, right? And so what we're proposing is kind of an organizational version or an organizationalized version of ChatGPT with Copilot, so to speak. And yet we're kind of putting up these headwinds in a sense, right, around adoption and so on and so forth, right, within the organization. So how is it, on the one hand, we can have people continue to be productive and continue to use ChatGPT kind of on an individualized basis, right? And they're seeing value. But yet when we look at organizations and what organizations are trying to do, say around AI, there seem to be so many headwinds, right? Any thoughts on that, or maybe from the group in general? I know a number of the attendees have been using ChatGPT probably for a bit of time.
Kurt, I know, right, our own company has gone through the same cycle, right? We benefited from early access in the tool sets. And I think that we all can reflect on the excitement and then how do I, and so I think that it's real, and it's not a failure. It's a part of the process.